October 3rd, 1995. A man walks out of a Los Angeles courthouse a free man. The jury has spoken, not guilty, on 2 counts of murder. The most watched trial in American history, and he won. The cameras caught his smile. His lawyers celebrated. His supporters wept with relief on courthouse steps. But here's what nobody told you that day. Winning that trial was just the beginning of O.J. Simpson's downfall. Because 2 years later, a different court, with different rules, a different jury, and a different kind of justice, handed him a verdict that would cost him everything he had left. $33.5 million. And the question was no longer could they prove he did it. The question was, why did the first jury say he didn't? Stay with me, because what happened in these 2 courtrooms will change how you think about justice in America forever. June 12, 1994, Brentwood, California, just after midnight. A dog is howling in the neighborhood. A neighbor, Sakrubastape, follows the sound down the street and stops dead. There on the pathway outside 875 South Bundy Drive are 2 bodies. Nicole Brown Simpson, 35 years old, former wife of O.J. Simpson, and Ron Goldman, 25 years old, a friend of hers, a waiter who had stopped by to return a pair of sunglasses. Both had been stabbed repeatedly. The attack was vicious, close range, and personal. The police were called, the scene was secured, and detectives drove to the nearby estate of the only person they needed to notify, the ex-husband. That man was Orenthal James Simpson, former NFL superstar, celebrity pitchman, one of the most recognizable athletes in the world. And when detectives arrived at Rockingham Estate, nobody answered the door. That should have been a minor detail. It became one of the most debated facts in the entire case, because while they were waiting outside, one detective, Mark Fuhrman, jumped the wall to check on the property, and what he found there would ignite a legal firestorm unlike anything American courts had ever seen. On the side path of O.J. Simpson's estate, Mark Fuhrman found a bloody glove. It matched one found at the crime scene on South Bundy Drive. One glove there, one glove here. Same pair, same blood. O.J. Simpson was brought in for questioning that morning. His hands were cut. His explanation, he'd cut himself on a glass in his Chicago hotel room. He'd flown there the night of the murders for a business trip. A limousine driver had picked him up from the Rockingham estate that night at 10:45 p.m. to take him to the airport. But here's what the driver said under oath. He'd been waiting outside for nearly an hour, buzzing the intercom, getting no answer. Then, at 10:56 p.m., O.J. suddenly appeared. So where had he been for the previous hour? The prosecution had a theory, and they had blood to back it up. DNA evidence linked Simpson to the crime scene with what prosecutors called near scientific certainty. His blood was found at Bundy Drive. The victim's blood was found in his Ford Bronco, in his driveway, in his foyer. Nicole's blood was on his socks. To most people watching the evidence come in, this looked like the easiest murder conviction in history. But the defense had other plans. O.J. Simpson had resources, and he spent them. He assembled what the press called the Dream Team, a constellation of legal talent led by Johnny Cochran, backed by F. Lee Bailey, Barry Scheck, Robert Shapiro, and others. This wasn't a defense team, it was a legal army. And they didn't just plan to defend O.J. Simpson, they planned to put the Los Angeles Police Department on trial. The strategy was surgical. Every piece of evidence, every blood sample, every fiber, every photograph would be challenged at the level of how it was collected, handled, and processed. And they had ammunition. The LAPD crime lab turned out to have serious problems. Evidence had been mishandled. Blood samples had been left in a hot van for hours. A blood vial collected from O.J. was found to contain less blood than was drawn from him, suggesting something had been removed and planted. Then came Mark Fuhrman. Under cross-examination, F. Lee Bailey pushed Fuhrman directly. Had he ever used the N-word in the past 10 years? Fuhrman said no, under oath. Then the defense produced recordings, audio tapes of Fuhrman being interviewed for a screenplay years earlier, casually and repeatedly using the exact word he denied ever saying. Dozens of times. The same detective who found the glove on O.J.'s property had just been caught committing perjury on the stand. The defense didn't need to prove O.J. was innocent. They only needed the jury to believe the LAPD couldn't be trusted. And then came the single most iconic moment in American legal history. June 15, 1995. Midway through the trial, the prosecution asked O.J. Simpson to try on the gloves, the bloody gloves, the centerpiece of their entire case. O.J. stood up, slowly worked his hands into the leather, and then, in front of the jury, the cameras, and the entire watching world, he struggled. The gloves looked too small. He grimaced. He spread his fingers like a man trying to force his hands into something that simply would not yield. The prosecution argued the gloves had shrunk from exposure to blood and moisture. They argued it was theater. But Johnny Cochran took that moment and turned it into a closing argument that would ring through courtrooms for decades. If it doesn't fit, you must acquit. Simple, rhythmic, unforgettable. On October 3, 1995, after less than 4 hours of deliberation, the jury returned not guilty. Not guilty. The country split in two along racial lines that had been quietly fracturing for decades. The Rodney King beating, the 1992 riots, a history of documented LAPD brutality against Black Americans. For many Black Americans, the acquittal felt like a system finally being held accountable. For many white Americans, it felt like a guilty man had walked free. O.J. Simpson walked out of jail promising to find the real killers. He never did, but someone was still coming for him. Here's what most people don't realize about the American legal system. Criminal and civil courts are not the same game. They play by different rules. In a criminal trial, the prosecution must prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. It's the highest legal standard in existence because the stakes are incarceration or death. In a civil trial, the standard is called preponderance of evidence, meaning, is it more likely than not that this person did it? More than 50% likely, that's it. And in a civil trial, the defendant can be forced to testify. The families of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman filed a wrongful death suit against O.J. Simpson. The Goldman family had lost a son. They wanted accountability. They wanted the world to hear what they believed. The trial began in October 1996, and this time, O.J. had to sit in that witness chair and answer questions. For days, the same evidence came back. The blood, the timeline, the gloves, but now there was more. Photographs emerged of O.J. wearing the exact style of Bruno Magni shoes that had left a rare footprint at the crime scene. Shoes he'd claimed under oath he'd never owned. Then dozens of photographs surfaced before the murders showing him wearing them. His credibility collapsed in real time. And unlike the criminal trial, this jury, predominantly white from Santa Monica, deliberated for only a few hours before returning their verdict. February 4, 1997, liable on all counts. $8.5 million in compensatory damages to the Goldman family. Then, the punitive damages phase began, and the jury, apparently wanting to make absolutely certain the message was received, awarded an additional $25 million. Total, $33.5 million. O.J. Simpson had beaten the criminal system. The civil system had just taken everything, or at least it tried to. Here's where it gets infuriating, depending on your perspective. O.J. Simpson largely didn't pay. He moved to Florida, a state with strong asset protection laws. His NFL pension, reportedly around $25,000 a month, was protected from seizure under Florida law. His primary residence could not be seized. He lived in a comfortable house, played golf regularly, and by most accounts refused to significantly change his lifestyle. The Goldman family collected a fraction of what was owed over the years, mostly through court battles over specific assets. A painting here, memorabilia there. His Heisman Trophy sold at auction. By the time he died in April 2024 from prostate cancer at the age of 76, the Goldmans had collected roughly $133,000 of $33.5 million, less than 1%. The civil verdict was a moral victory. Financially, it was almost meaningless. There was one more chapter. In 2007, Simpson attempted to retrieve sports memorabilia he claimed was stolen from him in a botched confrontation in a Las Vegas hotel room. He was arrested, charged with armed robbery and kidnapping, and this time, with no dream team, no racial tensions in the jury pool, and no sympathetic narrative, he was convicted. He served 9 years in a Nevada state prison before being paroled in 2017. So what do we do with all of that? 2 courtrooms, 2 verdicts, 1 man, completely opposite outcomes. It would be easy to say the criminal trial was a failure and the civil trial was justice delayed. It would also be easy to say the criminal trial was the system working exactly as designed, protecting a defendant against a corrupt police department and a rushed investigation. Both of those things are probably true at the same time. The prosecution in 1995 made real mistakes. They rushed the collection of evidence. They didn't anticipate how badly the Fuhrman tapes would land. They underestimated a jury that had every reason, historical, personal, cultural, to distrust the LAPD. The prosecution handed the defense a story, and the defense told it brilliantly. The defense, for its part, did what defense attorneys are supposed to do. They found every weakness, exploited every crack, and they won. Whether you believe OJ was guilty or not, the legal strategy itself was textbook. The system gave them the tools to create reasonable doubt, and they used them. But the civil trial revealed something the criminal trial couldn't quite say out loud. A different jury, looking at the same evidence, concluded that it was more likely than not that OJ Simpson killed 2 people. They said it loudly. They said it with $33.5 million, and then he paid almost none of it because the law allowed him not to. What does that tell us about justice? It tells us that justice in America is not one thing. It's a system of competing rules, competing standards, competing narratives. It can be manipulated by wealth. It can be distorted by institutional failure. It can be shaped by who sits in the jury box and what they've personally lived through. The O.J. Simpson case didn't break American justice. It just held up a mirror, and the reflection was uncomfortable for almost everyone. 2 people, Nicole Simpson and Ron Goldman, were killed on a summer night in 1994. Whatever you believe about the verdicts, that fact never changed. Their families never stopped knowing it. And perhaps that's the truth that every verdict in this case ultimately failed to fully address. If this case made you think differently about how the legal system really works, not the version you see on television, but the real mechanics, the loopholes, the moments where everything hinges on a single glove, then this channel is exactly where you need to be. Every week, we go inside real cases that most people never heard of, and the ones they think they know but don't. Not guilty verdicts that quietly destroyed lives, convictions that unraveled decades later, trials where the truth was hiding in plain sight the whole time. Hit like if this video made you think. Subscribe so you never miss the next one, because justice is complicated, and you deserve to understand how it actually works.